Hello, everyone. Today, I'm going to give you training about storytelling using data visualizations. Let's just dive right into it. I'll first give a quick introduction about myself. My name is Laura van Vledder. I'm 29 years old, and I'm working as an analytics consultant at Ortec. Ortec is also part of one of the founders of Analytics for a Better World. I've worked at Ortec for about almost 6 years, and mostly working on projects of all the logos you see below. So ASML, DHL, IPP, which is a piling pulling company, Tata Steel, and also I've done a data visualization training at Oxfam. I studied econometrics at Maastricht University before starting to work, and currently I live in the region of Amsterdam. And today I'll be talking a bit about data visualization and storytelling. And for this, I would like to hear what your expectations are of this course. For that, I've created a little tool. So you can scan the QR code and let us know what your expectations are of this course, and hopefully we'll see some of your answers pop up onto this slide. So I'll give it a few minutes for you to start entering your answers. And then while I see that people are already typing, that's great. Okay, beginner friendly, understandable. Some examples you want to see: graphs, customer journey. Okay, I see that the most, some people are still typing, I see, but the biggest one is storytelling. That will definitely be part of this course. We'll also focus on graphs and visualization. I also see Power BI will be less focusing on the tools, but more focusing on what sort of visualizations you can do. Trying to read some more of these processes and techniques. Practical, we'll make sure that we'll touch upon most of these. Like I said, we'll be focusing more on the storytelling and what visualizations to choose and the power of visualization, and less on Power BI, Tableau, more of the dashboarding sort of tooling. I see that one more person is typing. Let's just wait for that person to finish. Great. As you can see here, I've already used some sort of data visualization where you can visualize words, which then, as they have been used more times, the bigger they appear on the screen. So this is also an example of a data visualization, just where the data is qualitative instead of quantitative. thanks all for giving your expectations of the course. I'm hoping to meet your expectations a little bit to have more of an overview of the course. It's going to be main parts, and we'll have a break in between. We'll have one break sort of halfway. The course is 3 hours. I'll try to do it in those 3 hours, so that you can all continue your valuable work or enjoy the evening wherever you are in the world. So let's go to the agenda. So we've already started with an introduction, then I'll go a bit deeper into the power of visualization. And then we're going to go through the 4 steps, like I mentioned. First of all, understanding the context. Second, choosing the appropriate visualization. Third, we'll dive into eliminating clutter. And the 4th one is drawing attention where you want it to be. And then we'll have some final tips and tricks and the closure of this training. Feel free to ask questions in the chat. I hope that Irina can help me a little bit monitor the chat to see if there are questions, but feel free to them. And if anything pops up, then I'll try to answer them.
Maybe people can also like raise hands digitally, so you can maybe see from time to time this as well.
Yeah, I'll try to keep an eye on it with my slides and everything else.
Yep, but I'll do it now and then.
If I miss anything, please let me know. All right. Let's go into the first one, the power of visualization. So why is visualization so important? I want to illustrate this by looking at these 4 time series. So we have 4 time series in a table with an x-axis and a y-axis displayed. And I would like for you to say what is special about a certain time series. So is there anything that stands out, or can you analyze this time series well? I'm pretty sure, without you answering the question in the chat, that it's very difficult to get any sort of useful information out of these 4 series as they are now in this table. But when I visualize it in a graph or in a scatter plot in this case, you can much more easily see what these data points actually, what story they tell. For instance, with the 3rd series, you can see that it's basically a straight line with one outlier. Same holds for series 4, where it's mostly all dots in one vertical line, except for one. With the 2nd time series, you can see it's a nice curve. And with the first one, you can see there are points scattered around, but have a positive trend upwards. With the series as they were in the table, that was very difficult to see. So making it visual really tells a story without having to use many words. I'll give another example of this with the following. Here's a phrase, and I'm trying to let you picture some shapes. So when shape D is inside B and A contains both B and C, where B and C don't overlap, do C and D have an overlap? Yes or no? You can make your guess in the chat. I see some answers already flowing in. Most of you say no, they may not. Indeed, so it's a bit difficult like you have to really draw it out for yourself to see if they do or not. But when I draw it out, so I'm going to reveal the answer. When I draw it out, it suddenly becomes very evident that they don't, D and C. So here, when I have this visual and then ask you the question, do D and C overlap? Then you can immediately say, no, they don't. So a visual really has the power to convey a message very quickly. And people are in general very visual beings. So making things visual is can give a lot of insights. Like Richard Hemming said, the purpose of computing is about insight and not numbers. A lot of people, when they are really busy in their Excel sheets, it's really, they focus on the nitty-gritty numbers, but it's more about the bigger insights that we gain. And this is also part of the training that we're going to do today, where we focus on not getting to the numbers, but more telling the story of the insights you've gained. So what are we going to do today? This is from the book Storytelling with Data by Cole Nussbaumer Knaflick. So if by the end of this training you want to get a little bit into more detail and want to get into all the details about storytelling with data, then I would highly suggest reading this book. For today, we'll go through 4 out of these 6 steps, which are the first 4. So understanding the context, meaning who, what, and how. Choosing an appropriate visualization. So which visualization do you use for the data that you have? Step 3, eliminating clutter, making sure that we only really show the necessary data. And number 4 is drawing attention where you want it to go. So we'll focus on these 4 steps, starting with the first one, understanding the context. So as Cole, the writer of this book, says, data visualization doesn't start with data visualization. Well, what do they mean by that? Let's start with 2 types of data exploration we could do, or how you get to data. So there's exploratory, where it's about the whole analysis, and it's really about finding this needle in a haystack. So you have this big haystack of your data, you're trying to understand it, you're trying to compare and contrast your data. This is more where dashboarding comes in. So Power BI, Tableau, Spotfire, those sort of tools might be useful for the exploratory phase of your data. So you're trying to find out what might be interesting. So you're analyzing, you're browsing, you're simulating. And next is you've found that needle in that haystack. You found some insights, you found what is worth telling in your data. And that is that explanatory part of data, is explaining your data and having a call to action. So it's not about everything that you've analyzed, but it's more about that one thing that you found. So it could be a specific overview of results when you're presenting them. And based on what analysis you're doing, you could have a very different requirements for data visualization. So when using exploratory, when you're still exploring your data, you might have different ways you want to visualize your data compared to when you're explaining your data. And today we'll focus on the explanatory part of this data. So you've done your research, and now you want people to take action based on what you found, or you at least want to tell them a story about it. So we'll focus on the explanatory today. To understand the context, we need to answer 3 questions first. First of all, who is your audience? Who are you presenting this data to? And what are the stakeholders? Who are they? And if you can narrow it down to one person, who would that one person be? For instance, you're trying to get donators for a charity. Who is that one person you're trying to convince to donate to your charity? Picture that person and what drives them. That is what you're trying to answer with this who question. Next is what needs to be addressed. So what does your audience need to know or do? And why should they care? And if they shouldn't care, then why are you telling this story to them? So you're really trying to figure out what is the thing that you're wanting to tell these people. And if you don't feel like you're confident in making a recommendation, you can at least encourage discussion. In this part, try to avoid the, oh, that's interesting, let's move on effect. You want to have your audience do something, or at least be trigger some sort of discussion or idea in their head. So this is what you want to answer with the what question. The next is how. So how will data help you make your point? What data is available, and how will this data become supportive of the story that you're telling? How can this data become evidence of what you are saying? It could be that you found out a lot of data, and it could be that some data doesn't support the story that you're telling. Do not ignore the data that doesn't support your story, because it could be misleading, and when something is misleading, it is also likely to backfire. So how will data help make your point? This will also focus on in the training. So in step 1, we'll so in this chapter of the training, we'll dive into the who and the what, and we'll have a little exercise of that as well. And the how will be the remainder of the training. So step 2, 3, and 4. To give you a bit of an example of this, for instance, you've done a proof of concept and you're trying to convince management of where you've done this proof of concept to get more budget for full projects. So the who could be the one manager that has to approve the budget. The what is, so what needs to be addressed is the potential value and the benefit of the project that you want to do. So you want to make sure that they know that a certain budget needs to be approved and that the proof of concept was a success. And how can you do this with data is, for instance, showing the results of the before and after situation of the proof of concept, showing that it indeed was, it's a good investment to continue with this to a full project. So this is an example of the who, the what, and the how. To continue, to be able to get your story clear, so what is the thing that you want to tell? Who do you want to tell it to? You can use this thing called a 3-minute story. It's a short narrative that summarizes a few elements. So the introduction and the background context, what is important, so what is the business challenge or the KPI that you want to discuss, and also frame it in terms of what your audience needs to hear. You would tell something very different to C-level people as to someone that just started in the company, for instance. What is the goal? So what needs to change, or what do you want to spark? And what is the solution? How will or did you bring about the changes? So that is a short narrative that you can basically say in 3 minutes. So it's the essential of the story that you want to tell. Why is this useful? It helps you form your message, so really get to the essence of what you're wanting to say. It could be a backup for if your presentation time is reduced. If, for instance, my presentation time from 3 hours would go to 3 minutes, what would I want to tell? To have that clear is could be very important to structure your presentation. And it can be used for sort of a elevator pitch or an impromptu moment to share what you've been working on. Knowing the essence can really help in that. So this can really help clarify your story and make sure that you know what story you want to tell. Then we also have this concept of your big idea. So you've analyzed the data, you know it well, and now it's time to communicate your learnings from it to someone else. So the big idea is a concept that will help get clear what the main message is you want to get across. It's a single complete sentence that articulates our point of view and conveys what is at stake in the situation. So it's really one sentence that conveys what you want to tell. It includes who your audience is. So to create this one sentence, keep in mind who your audience is. If it's a single person, who is this person? And what does this person care about? And what action do you want this person to take? So really try to embody that person to see what is important to them. Why do they need to act the way that they need to act? What action do you want to take? What do you want them to take? And then the next one is, what is at stake? So what are the benefits if your audience acts the way that you want them to act? And what is that risk if they don't? So make sure that you also know the so what to your story. Why is it important? Why is it important they act a certain way? And to practice this, I have an exercise, which is to take a few minutes to think about a recent or current project and use this big idea worksheet that I'll post in the chat, or Irina will post in the chat. I can do it if she doesn't have it handy. And to fill out the who and the what of your big idea for that project. So if you're going to talk about your project, who would you want to talk to, and what needs to be addressed? And then construct a big idea sentence. So to make sure you get this message across, and reflect on, is your big idea positively or negatively framed? What is the benefit or risk in this big idea? And could you reframe it from being the opposite? So if it's a positive, could it also be twisted negative and the other way around? So think about this project that you have. There's also an example in the exercise sheet that I have. If you don't have a current project, then I have a fictive one for you. Let me see if I can share it. Everyone in this meeting. All right, I've shared the zip file of this storytelling exercise. I'm gonna give you about let's say 12 minutes. So it's now 2:28 my time, so until 2:40, and then we'll get back. I will share the link to the book with you. The only thing is I don't know where you all live. So I'll at least share the title and maybe the Amazon.com link so that in your own country you can find where it is. All right, good luck. If you have any questions, feel free to pop it in the chat and I'll type along. See you in about 11 minutes.
So, Laura, can you repeat the exercise? What
Yes.
should we do? What should we do? We do exactly?
Of course, I'll repeat it. So in the zip file that I've shared, there's this big idea worksheet. And in that worksheet, I would like you to fill out who your audience is and what needs to be addressed to this audience so that you can formulate your big idea, which means, and for inspiration, if you don't have something that you immediately want to tell, take, for instance, your current project or a past project and think about who you would want to talk to about your project. So maybe the result of a project or some issues you are having with this project. Think about who you want to address it to and what you want to address to formulate this big idea and to formulate the story you would like to tell. Does that answer your question?
Sorry, did you upload everything on GitHub?
Yes, I did. So there are zip files of the exercises, and one of them should be the exercise 1 storytelling.zip. I've also added it in the chat.
Thank you.
Okay, so we should follow this example.
You can, yes, you can follow
Okay.
the example that's in the
screen, okay.
on the screen, yes. But there's also a project or an example in the zip file. So if you are not working on anything, can't think of an example, then there's something that might inspire you there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Dear Laura,
Yes.
I have a question. The second one, it says that if you had to narrow this to a single person, who would that be? What
Yeah.
does it mean?
So it could be that you're wanting to, let's give an example. Say you want to start a marketing campaign on Instagram to target younger people to start donating, for instance. It could be that if you target this to one single person, it could be your cousin or your niece that is 16 years old, scrolling through Instagram and interested in what her high school friends think of her, for instance. So instead of having this whole group of teenagers, you narrow it down to one person.
Okay, but I made it to related to my work. So could it be my direct supervisor?
Yeah, could be.
Okay.
So let's say you're trying to or want to present to this a C-level group of people. It could be that you're wanting to target the CEO specifically, who at Vortex, for instance, is Michael. Michael has worked there for X years. He has currently got a few projects on his plate, et cetera, et cetera. So it could be that it you want to narrow down to one person from this group of people that you're presenting to.
Okay, thanks.
No worries.
So, Laura, because I had to come in late, basically what I missed was the material on selecting your audience from what I gather.
So it's about making sure you know what the context is. So who are you telling
Right.
this story to?
Who you're targeting, your audience,
yeah,
your
so who are
intended
you
audience.
targeting, but also what do you want to address to your audience?
Right.
Both the who and the what.
Thank you.
I see that the allocated time that I've said you had for this exercise has passed. So let's continue for the sake of time. I see that Alexis has a question. So in which context do you want to answer the question, what action does your audience need to take? So as I mentioned, is that you don't want the audience to think, oh, that's interesting. Now I can forget about it and never think about it again. You want them to do something. Otherwise, why are you telling the story? Do you want to inform them? Do you want an action to be done? So why are you telling this story, and what sort of emotion do you want to evoke? What action do you want your audience to take? Do you want to have them take up this information and use it in practice? For instance, what I'm doing, if you're giving a training, do you want them to change their behavior? So for instance, make them aware of the impact of recycling, for instance, and make sure that they recycle more. Could be anything. So instead of just giving them information, what do you want them to do with this information? Instead of, okay, interesting, and I
Okay.
will never think about it again.
Sorry, Laura. The last part,
Yeah.
can you explain it briefly? From your big idea, it should 1 and 2 and 3. Should we add something here?
Sorry, I'm not understanding your question.
Okay, we have 3 parts in the exercise. The last one, I couldn't get the idea. What should we do? What should we add there?
You mean for your big idea?
Yes.
So it is something like, it's a complete sentence that should tell your point of view. So what needs to be addressed?
Like
And
highlights.
sorry?
One sentence contains the 3 ideas.
It contains your point of view, or the thing that you want to convey, the message you want to convey to your audience.
Okay, good.
I hope this has given you a little bit of structure you can use for the future to try to make sure you know what story you want to tell. It's just a tool to use to, instead of having a lot of different stories, to narrow it down to something very specific you want to, the essence of the story you want to tell. This is just a way that you can get that message a bit more clear for yourself. If there is any other way you would like to do, feel free to not use this, but know that these are some of the tools you can use for the future to get your idea clear of what message you want to convey. I would like to continue and show you an example when your idea and story is not very clear. I'm hoping the sound works. I hope I shared my slide in the correct way when I started. If you don't hear anything, let me know and I'll restart the sharing process.
Take a look at some of these charts.
I'd love to.
We're going to look.
Let's look.
And if you look at death,
Yeah.
per,
It's started to go up
here's
again.
one. Well, right here, the United States is lowest in numerous categories. We're lower than the world.
Lower than
We're
the
lower
world?
than
What does that mean?
Europe.
In
Take a
what?
look.
In what?
Take a look. Right here. Here's case death.
Oh, you're doing death as a proportion of cases. I'm talking about death as a proportion of population. That's where the US is really bad.
Well,
Much worse than South Korea, Germany, etc.
you can't do that. You have
Why
to go.
can't I do that?
You have to go by where. Look, here is the United States. You have to go by the cases. The cases.
Why
are
not
there.
as a proportion of
When we have
population?
somebody, what it says is when you have somebody that
Yeah.
has where there's a case.
Oh, okay.
The people that live
Sure.
from
Oh.
those cases.
It's surely a relevant statistic to say if the US has X population and X percentage of death of that population
No,
versus
because you
South
have to
Korea.
go by the cases.
Well, look at South Korea,
If-
for example. 51 million population, 300 deaths. It's like, it's
You-
crazy
you don't
compared to
know
other
that.
countries. I do. It's on
You
the.
don't know
it's-
that.
You think they're faking their statistics? South Korea?
I
An
won't get
advanced
into
country?
that because I have a very good relationship
Yeah.
with the country, but you don't know that. And they have spikes. Look, here's
Germany,
one.
low,
Here's
9,000.
one. Here's one right here, United States. You take
Anyway.
the number of cases.
Okay.
Now look, we're last, meaning we're first.
Last, I don't know.
So here's an example of Donald Trump explaining charge of COVID cases. And you see that he really didn't consider who was in front of him, trying to manipulate the data to convince the story that he was trying to tell, which, as you see, backfired. So make sure you know who's in front of you, what you want to convey, and make sure your data is actually not misleading. So think about who you have in front of you and what you want to say and how your data can support this story, unlike Donald Trump in this case. So next is choosing the appropriate visualization. So you've thought about who your audience is and what you want to address, and now you want to show the data that supports your story. And there are many visualizations to choose from. And it is important to choose the right visualization. So let's take this example to show the importance of the right visualization. So this is something about the United States. Obesity is, on average, inversely proportional to the average education of the population, meaning that if a population is more highly educated, then they're less likely to be obese. That is what this statement says, and we would like to have a visualization that shows this. But what visualization should we choose? So here I have one type of graph that shows this. So on the left we have the education, and on the right we have obesity, where each circle shows a percentage of the degree or if they are obese. And the size of the circle shows that percentage. But as you can see, the circles are really hard to interpret. You can barely see the difference between circle sizes, and it gets very, very cluttered in the east of the United States because there are so many states. So what is a better visualization that we can use? We can, for instance, change this to a heat map, where again on the left we have the highly educated people, and on the right we have the obesity numbers. So this is already a better visualization because the rings are not too crowded. The color is better interpretable than the size of the circles. But the problem with these sort of charts is that larger states get automatically more attention because they're just larger in size. So the smaller states also get less attention, and you need to compare two maps separately. So it's hard to see if indeed there's a correlation between obesity and education level. So let's see if we can do a little bit better by using this chart. This is called a popsicle chart, which shows the again on the left the education, on the right the obesity. So it's different categories. It's a ranked list, so we start from highest to lowest and from highest to lowest on both charts.
How about box and whiskers?
Sorry?
Box and whiskers. Box
Well,
and whiskers plots.
As a different type, you mean this one?
For this, no. For the other scenario, a list of box and whiskers plots.
That could be an option
in ranked
indeed.
order.
Yeah, so there are many different visualizations you can choose.
I would prefer to use the heat map with the pie chart inside each district. I think this would be great
A
instead
heat
of
map
this
with
one
a
with a pie chart.
inside of each region.
Yes.
Well, then I think you will get a similar problem as this, where
Yeah.
the pie would be very small in each state, especially if the states are small.
Yes.
Plus, never use pie charts, and I will get to that later.
I love the donut one, the donut
Yeah.
chart. Yes.
So pie charts are evil, and I will get to that at a later point in time.
Okay.
Yeah, you get the same issue where it will be very small in some states and you have more space in different states. And here it's still difficult, like with each list it is nice to compare, but you have to really look up, okay, the District of Columbia is first in education, where is it on the list for obesity? I see that Estefani has suggested a scatter plot. Yeah, it's also really hard to read. So here I have a different version, which is on the left you have the education, and on the right again you have the obesity. But both are in percentages on the y-axis. So for each line represents a state. I actually don't know what this one is called. Parallel coordinate plot, I think. As it says in my notes, but I don't use this often because it's hard to compare for a larger, it's difficult to interpret. You need someone explaining what you're seeing. And so you can see the relation holds true for each individual line. But like Estefani has suggested, a scatter plot is actually quite nice. So you have, for each dot is a state, and on the y-axis you have the education level, on the x-axis you have the obesity level. No, sorry, other way around. And here you can really see the negative relation of it, and you can also see the outliers. What are my thoughts about this not starting at 0? So for scatter plots, it's okay. For bar charts, we should really start at 0. And I will explain why very soon. So with scatter plots, it is quite nice to see this relationship, but it gets difficult for people to interpret because it's quite scientific. So not everyone always understands it immediately. So be a little bit careful with scatter plots depending on the audience that you have. So here I've put all the visualizations next to each other, and as you can see, each visualization has pros and cons. I'm very interested in this box and whiskers because I'm not familiar with this type of chart. So maybe in one of the breaks, or if you have an example very quickly, you can send it in the chat. But here you can see the importance of choosing the right visualization, and each of them has pros and cons. And for now, I would like to go through a bit of a guide to visualization types. So there are quite some types of visualizations and graphs you can choose from. This is just a selection of them, and we will discuss the most common ones, and but there are a lot of others to choose from. So here I have quickly marked which ones are nice to use, which are by check marks. So simple text and bar charts and line charts. Those are great visualization types. You can always use them. People find it easy to interpret, and they have a low learning curve. The ones with the squiggly line next to it, the tilde, use them with caution. I would say not to never use them, but they have a little bit more of a higher learning curve, or they give a lot of information at the same time, meaning the person that views these needs to take a bit more time to really interpret what it says. So use these with cautions, and the ones with an X across, really try to avoid these. They are hard to interpret or can be misleading, or have a high learning curve. So try to avoid them. I will go through them, all these, a little bit. Especially the first 4, maybe a little bit more in depth, and then the next 4 a little more quickly. So starting with simple text. Let me just take a sip in the meantime. Simple text highlights a number or text. Basically, it's to emphasize one key piece of information. So you want to share maybe 1 or 2 important pieces of your information. So an example is, here you can clearly see the difference. So we have on the left a bar chart of the percentage of stay-at-home moms, one from the 1970s and one from 2012. While on the left we say 20% of children had a stay-at-home mother in 2012 compared to 41% in 1970, meaning you're really emphasizing this 20%. And not the 41 of the year 1970. The thing with simple text, though, is that you can lose a little bit of context. If you would, for instance, say here, it has dropped more than 50%, and you highlight this 50%, you lose the context of the beginning and the end value. So it could have gone from 80 to 40, while it went from 40 to 20%. So make sure that you realize that using this one big simple text can cause you to lose a bit of context, but it's very powerful in the sense that it gives you one piece of information that everyone sees immediately. So that is one visualization that you can use. The next, which is also great, is bar charts. And bar charts show change over time, or you can compare different categories or compare parts of a whole. You have vertical bar charts and horizontal bar charts. Vertical is used if it's more chronological data, so think about years of the month or month of the years. And it's also nice to use when there's negative values, because you can go below the x-axis. And you have horizontal charts, which is nice if you have long category labels. I would highly recommend using bar charts, because people are very used to them. We see bar charts all the time, and it has a really low learning curve. The bar charts are easy for the eyes to read, because our eyes, they compare the endpoints of the bars, and we see which one is biggest or tallest. This is why it is very important to start at 0, because we're comparing the heights of the bars, and if they don't start at 0, it can be very misleading. It can be very misleading to compare them. You can use them to compare more than 3 series. So 3 series or more than. Make sure, though, you order the categories well. Order really matters. So, for instance, make them so that it goes from biggest to smallest, or chronologically in the year, or alphabetically, but make sure the order makes sense and don't just randomly place them. So these are bar charts. You also have stacked bar charts, which can be 100% stacked or just regular stacked. So you can see how parts have a portion of a whole. You need to be a little bit careful when it comes to these, and I'll explain that in a second. You can use 100% stacked if the amount of the bar, so the total, is unimportant. So you're really trying to only show a percentage, and you don't really care about how much the total value was. That is when you use 100% stacked. If you do care about the total value, then use the normal stacked bar chart.
Where should we use the percentage and where we should use the total number?
So if the total is important, then you should use the total number. Because with the 100% stacked, you don't know what the total number here was. And if that is important, then you start comparing the heights. If it's unimportant, then you can just use the percentages. So think about, for instance, revenue of a company. You would like to see what the revenue was throughout the months and how that changed. But it could also be interesting which department has contributed to that revenue. Then I would say use a stacked, because you care about the total number, but you also care about the percentages of how that total number came to be. For 100% stacked, it could be that you don't care about this total number, but more care about the distribution of the thing that you're trying to see. I hope that answers your question a bit.
Well, I have one more question.
Yeah.
Can we go with the 100% stacked one with the percentage and only for the number with the stacked one? Because I think the percentage shows very well in 100% stacked bar chart. Am I correct or no?
Sorry, I don't know if I understand what you're asking.
Well, I will leave it in chat.
Okay, sure.
Just to make sure I've understood correctly, and maybe to see if I'm right. You use stacked bar plots when you want to visualize trends. Am I right? And 100% stacks are ideal for distributions.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And it's not necessarily trends, because for that you might also use a line chart, but indeed, if you care about the total, then
like in revenue, for example, you want to have an idea of
how it fluctuates. Yes.
Profiting or making a loss, and by how much, quantifying it. Thank you.
Indeed. Oh yeah, now I understand your question, Moonem. Yes, you can use the 100% stacked for describing a percentage. So indeed, the distribution, that is when you would use 100% stacked. Like I said quickly before, try to be careful with these stacked bar charts, because it gets hard to compare categories together. The lowest one is easy because they have a baseline that all starts at a certain level. The middle ones gets harder to compare to each other. Now, I saw someone ask in the chat, please tell us why to not recommend pie charts. This is the moment where I tell you to never ever use pie charts in your life. And I will tell you why. So first of all, when do you use pie charts or donut charts? It's to show parts of a whole relationship. So you want to see the whole pie. How is the pie divided? If you are wanting to use a pie chart, only really use it for very specific or very few categories. So only use a pie chart when comparing two categories. If you're using more than two, use the donut chart instead. People find it very difficult to compare angles to each other, and we are only really familiar with angles such as 25, 50, 75, or 100%. So when it's exactly a quarter or half or 3/4 of the pie. And I will show you that by an exercise. So here we have a pie chart, and I would like you to answer the question, which of the orange slices is larger? Is it the dark orange or the light orange? You can answer it in the chat.
Feels like the dark orange, but I think it's a trick question.
Okay, most people think it's the dark orange. Now my question is,
I
by
think
how
they
much?
are the same. No, they're not. They aren't the same.
They aren't the same. I can tell you that they aren't. Oh, I'm scrolling a bit. Sorry. I was going through trying to go through the chat. By how much do they differ? So if you think the dark one is different, and by how many % is it different?
Maybe 20. We need percentage on them.
What if the colors were more contrasting? I think you would have been able to tell had, for example, you didn't just use two color schemes. I mean,
I don't think that
Alright,
would matter too much.
I'm not saying it would be perfect, but at least I think it would be more distinguishable. You would be able to tell which sector is wider, but obviously not. It's not very accurate.
No, so it's very difficult, right? I see in the chat 1%, 5 to 10%, 15%, 20%. It's really difficult, and someone already mentioned try to add numbers. I did. So here you can see it's 7% or 8% difference. But pie charts are evil because humans are not really good at comparing angles of the pie chart. So we're only really good at doing straight angles, like the 45 degrees, so a quarter of a pie. And it can get very, very cluttered if you're using more than categories. More than 5 gets really confusing. So pie charts, if you're using them, you can do it to compare 2 categories because we know exactly half. So you can see which one is more than half and which one is less than half. But pie charts, because of the angle, are really difficult to see, to interpret. So what can you do if you really do like round charts? Pies are delicious, but donuts are also delicious. So try to use a donut chart instead for round visualizations. And why? For donuts, you are comparing the arc length, which humans are a lot better at comparing arc lengths compared to the angles. So with a pie chart, you're comparing an angle with each other. With donuts, you're comparing the arc to each other, which is in essence a line instead of an area. So donuts are delicious. Try to use donuts. Plus you get a nice space in the middle that you could use for an icon or some text, something to make it interesting. So I'm hoping I've convinced you that donuts are better. If not, come back to me later.
Donut is better.
Okay,
Yes.
great.
Better than the pie chart, yes.
3D donuts. No, never, ever, ever use 3D. 3D is not a good. If humans are bad at comparing 2D, then humans are really bad at doing 3D. So I would always use just flat visualizations. Sunburst, they can be quite tricky because it's quite a high learning curve. So you really have to see, okay, what is this visualization trying to tell me? We don't see sunburst often, which makes it hard for people to understand quickly. So you can use them, but it's just
What are sunbursts?
they look like, let me see if I can find an example quickly. They are like donuts, but a bit different. This one. This is what they look like. I've added it in the chat. They can be quite difficult to interpret. So if people have the time to analyze this visualization, it might be good. But I wouldn't say for a presentation because people are going to start reading it, which is you're trying to avoid people reading your charts. Let's continue to the next one, which is a line chart. A line chart shows a time series relationship or shows a trend. So use a line mostly for time series, not if you're comparing different categories together, then use a bar chart instead. The line really, like your eye really goes over the line, so really shows the trend. You're not comparing the heights of the points, but you're going through the lines, which is why it is okay for a line chart to not start at 0, but preferably it will be nice if it can start at 0. But let's say you have a line chart which only starts at 100 and then it fluctuates between 100 and 110, then you can remove the first 95 of the y-axis so that you can really see the fluctuation, because you're looking at the trend and not at the heights of the different categories. So this is why it's okay to not start at 0, because you're looking at the line. So you're using a line chart mostly for trends. This is also really nice charts to use because people are used to line charts. They know how to read them. They know how to interpret them. So it's also a low learning curve. So this is a great tool to use. For the next 4, I'll go a little bit more quickly. Area charts, I would try to avoid these. They are kind of like line charts, but they also have part of a whole. With these ones, because it has an area, you should start at 0. But it's really not great for the eyes to compare them together. Your minds are not great at processing these, so I would just try to avoid them. Use bars instead, or try to use different lines for different categories instead of trying to compare it as a whole. Then scatter plots, we've discussed them already a bit. So they show a relationship between 2 items. They're based on 2 sets of variables and they show a correlation. They are often used in the scientific field, and they are also viewed as more complicated to understand for people that are not used to them. So when using these, it might be nice to annotate or highlight some information that you want to show. For instance, get a trend line and highlight that, or highlight a clutter of dots that you find interesting. We'll come back to annotating and highlighting at a later part of this course. I see that there's a hand raised.
Yes. When can we use the trend line with the bar chart? I see some people are using them. Not the scattered one. The bar chart with the trend line.
So for instance, you can use that if, let's go back to the revenue example. If you have a revenue per month and you also have a target, you can say the target is the line and the bars are what you've actually achieved revenue-wise. And then you can easily see, has my revenue met that line, or has it, is it under or over? That would be a good example of when to use a line with a bar chart.
Okay, good.
Great. So scatter plots, you can use them. Just know that they're a bit more harder to interpret, and they take a bit more of a higher learning curve. Next, we have a bubble chart. Bubble charts show different rankings, and they show two different variables in one chart. For instance, here you see revenue and for each product, and the cost of a product as well shows the size of the bubble. And on the right, you see the location of, oh, sorry.
In other words, it's comparing a continuous to a categorical value. It's comparing categorical variables to continuous variables, from what I can see there.
Yeah, in this case, yes. So the bubble can differ in size, and that's on a continuous scale indeed. But the color is showing categories instead. So those are actually 4 or 3 different things that you see. You see the consumer rating, the revenue, the product type, and the product cost all in one table, which is quite a lot to interpret. And on the right, you see the a map where each dot shows the location, and the size of the dot is the sales percentage. So you can also use it for visualizing specific geographical regions. Bubble charts are tricky because they can get very quickly, very busy very quickly, meaning that it gets hard to compare the bubbles together. They start overlapping, and people find it difficult to see the difference in size. Are you comparing the total area of the bubble, or the radius of the bubble, or the diameter of the bubble? People find that difficult.
Is there like a cutoff number when it comes to variables when you can use a bubble plot? Like, is there a maximum recommended number of variables to visualize on it, like 4 or 3?
I would say don't go over 3.
Don't go over 3.
Yeah, as a benchmark. If you're wanting to go over 3, then maybe use a table. The problem with tables, though, is that people read them. So if you're broadcasting or presenting and you show a table, people stop listening and start reading what's on your slide. So be careful with these, but you can have multiple different variables, multiple different information all in one visualization or in one table, and people pick out the necessary information for them. So I see someone says font color can be different to represent trend or story in a table. Yes, so you can indeed use, for instance, highlighting numbers or emphasizing things to show things in the table that you find interesting. Making a heat map inside the table is also nice. So showing things that are more interesting as brighter, and or with a higher value as brighter, and things with a lower value as lower. So definitely you could use heat maps in a table as well. for a table, it's nice if your design of the table, the background fades into the background of your slide, so that the focus is on the numbers of the table. So you're really focusing on the numbers instead of the formatting of the table itself. And we'll talk about cognitive load later. I have a few more, and then it's time for a break. So I have geospatial data, a series, meaning we have 3 different types of geospatial data to show. And geospatial data basically displays data in relation to a physical location. With geospatial data, make sure, like I said before, be careful with the state effect of things being larger states getting immediately more emphasis, and also be careful with autocorrelation, that things that are next to each other you think might be correlated, but actually are not. So make sure that you keep that in mind while choosing your geospatial data map. So let's go through the 3 of these. We have a choropleth map, which displays data across the geographical areas on a map. So it uses the boundaries already given in a map, for instance, states, countries, cities, those sorts of regions. And each region gets a specific one specific data point, and it gets a color of that data point. Make sure that when you use a choropleth map, that the color range is just one color range. So don't try to use a very big mix of different colors, because then you don't know how to interpret them. So you can go from light to dark, but not yellow, blue, green, etc., because then you don't understand what value is given to a certain number. Make sure that these categories, so each color has the same jump in between them, so that it doesn't go from 60 to 76 and then 77 to 78. Make sure that they're all consistent. So that is something that you can do with a choropleth map. If state regions are not important and a more exact location is important, you can use an isopleth map, which displays continuous data using isolines. Isolines are where we see them most is, for instance, when you're describing heights of mountains, for instance, how a mountain landscape looks. Then each point that has the same height, there's a line drawn between them, and that creates these shades. So isopleth maps do not take boundaries into consideration, like they go over state lines. So you can use this if data crosses over standard geographical boundaries, and if your data isn't bound by population. With these, also try to only use one category. Don't try to use more, and don't try to use conflicting color schemes. And last but not least, we have the point map. And the point map contains a symbol or a dot for a very specific point on the map. For instance, locations of universities. The thing with point maps is that it can get quite busy quite quickly. And to avoid this, you can use clusters. For instance, here they've already clustered that here in this small region, there are 27 points. So if you would zoom in, you would then, if there's a space for it, have those 27 points displayed. Just to make sure that it doesn't get too crowded if all of them are always displayed at the same time. So indeed, they overlap a little bit here, but you can still see the individual numbers. With these, try not to also have too many categories. So here you could say a point gets a different color for categories, a different size for the amount, a different shape for a different category. If you start doing that, then it gets really hard to interpret. So use 3 max, I would say. So that's the location, the color, basically already stop there. And try to make sure that it doesn't overlap too much. Point maps are great when you're trying to really illustrate really specific points. So if the exact location matters. That is what I wanted to tell you a bit about choosing the right visualization or the different types. Let's have a 15-minute break. I know it's a lot of information, so let's take a little break, and I'll see you back here at it's now 3:30, so at 3:45. I hope everyone had a nice break. I see a thumbs up from Yuri. That's nice.
Yes.
Great. I would suggest that we continue. I see one new message. Oh, back. That's great. Let's continue then. So we've talked about many different types of visualizations. So how do you choose the right one? That is the next question to answer. So here I have 5 different aspects you need to take into consideration when choosing a visualization. The first one is who is your audience, like we've talked about before. But when picking your visualization, you can think about, are they known in the scientific field, yes or no? So can you use a scatter plot, or will they not understand that, for instance? So really think about who your audience is and what they'll be able to understand. Also, how long their attention span is. So if you're going to post a visualization on social media, it needs to grab someone's attention super quickly, and it shouldn't take long for them to interpret. While if it's in an email and they have a bit more time, you can use a bit more of a high learning curve visualization. Next is what is your goal? So what do you want to do with your data? Do you want to emphasize one thing, or do you want to show the entire picture? Given that goal, you can choose different visualizations. Next, what data do you have? So is there a relationship that it shows? How many variables do you have? Think about the data, and then you can also decide what visualization you have. You can make with that. Next, how much detail is needed? Do you need all the information, or can you keep it simpler? And next up is repetition is good. So if you've used a bar chart already, don't think, oh, I really should not be using a bar chart because I've already used it. No, then especially it is good to use a bar chart then, because people are really good at interpreting the same chart over and over and over again and seeing the differences between them. So don't be afraid of repetition. It is a great tool to use. I can imagine that having all these 5 things, it might still be difficult to choose a visualization. And that's why there are quite some resources that will help you pick the one that fits with the data that you have. So there are a few sources that you can use that will help you. So we have that, of course. I don't know if I can copy and paste it, but it's also on GitHub in one of the exercises that I have. I can at least copy paste the two in the chat. Let me try to do that. I will do that once I've once I go to the next slide, because the next slide is an exercise. I will share the exercise in the chat and also the link of the GitHub for the people that were trying to find it. And there we go. The exercise is the following. You are doing a project in the HR department, and every year they are investigating the voluntary turnover rate of employees. So not the people that are being fired, but the people that are choosing to leave the company. And here we have a table which shows the months of the year and the turnover rates in 2019 and in 2020. And my question is to you to practice is, how would you represent this data to be most insightful? So are you going to have a general overview of the turnover, compare 2019 versus 2020? Think about, do any data or months stand out? So my question to you is, you get in this exercise, there's a Excel sheet with this data, and I'm going to give you about 10 to 15 minutes. Let's see how you are doing after 10, to see if you need an additional 5 more minutes to create a visualization of this for the HR department. Let me know if you have...
Only using Excel.
Yeah, well, the data is in Excel, but you can use whichever tool you want. But know that we only have a set amount of minutes, so try not to go super advanced. So you can use whatever you want: PowerPoint, Excel, Power BI, Tableau, pen and paper, whatever tool you have. The data will be provided to you in Excel. And I would say have fun with it. And if you have any questions, I'll be here reading the chat. And in the meantime, I'll share the links to of the two websites that were on the previous slide. There's also a wow, someone is done quickly. But try to look at, okay, what is interesting for the HR department? Are there insights that I could be highlighting, etc.? Is the line charts indeed per year the best to choose, or do you want bar charts, a different type of line chart, etc.? So I'll see you back here in well, let's say 7 more minutes. And share these after those 7 minutes. So give don't give people the let's say creative freedom or a nudge in the direction you are going in, but let's see what everyone comes up with when they don't already have an example. I see the worst chart ever, but at least it's a donut and not a pie. Worst chart would be if it was a pie chart. And if it was 3D. Yeah, that's even worse.
Now I have the fully understanding.
Oh, wow. I don't know what this is. This is difficult. I understand what it's supposed to show, but it's not ideal. All right, let's take a few more minutes for everyone to share theirs. There we go, the 3D pie chart. Super hard to understand. And then after everyone has gotten the chance, let's take a few of these to compare them and see what we like about them, what we don't like about them, how we would change things, etc. I see, can we consider this one, I guess, to compare? Sure. All right, I don't see many more coming into the chat, so let's start comparing a few of these. I think I've shared my whole screen, so you should be able to see this line chart. Please say if you don't. I hear no one speak, so that's great. Then my question is, let me go to the next slide. So let's compare the visualizations that we've made. What are the pluses and minuses of each? What would you choose? And are the other suggested visuals? So I've chosen this one to discuss first. What do we like about this one and what do we not like about this one?
It gives the clear idea about what we want to tell from the chart.
Besides, we can differentiate between the 2 years performance.
Easy. Yes.
You cannot really compare the totals, though, the monthly totals for each month for 2019 and 2020. Yes, you can see the trends, but you cannot compare the monthly totals for 19 and 20.
Maybe I would prefer to put the percentage on the points, not beside them.
Not
in
at
the
the
y-axis.
you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
It allows us to compare the trends across period months for the 2 years, and you can see that in certain months there's a dip, in certain months there's a spike, and that can help you in decision making in terms of how you plan for your turnovers.
Yeah,
for those
so
months.
indeed there is what this chart really shows is it is quite cyclical, that it goes up a little bit in January, then down later, then a bit up more in the summer, and then down again in the fall and winter period, with a spike in April 2020, which of course was COVID. So what would be good to do in this chart is, for instance, already give some insights. You can already type them out saying there is less turnover in the winter, and this spike is because of, or we think is because of COVID. There's something that you can already add as text there. Then I saw someone that did this instead. So cumulative chart. What do we like about this one, and what are the minus points of this one?
I think those bars are extra.
Yes. They look professional, but they distract idea.
Yeah. And what is also hard to interpret is this point, is it 3.2% or is it 0.80%? Because there are two axes, we don't know which one relates to which. And indeed, cumulative is not really relevant for percentages. So it could be that you're interested in the total amount of people that left by the end of the year. But the double axes are mostly very confusing.
Yeah, we should identify which idea we want to represent.
Yeah.
The accumulative or the percentage.
Yeah. Then let's see if we can compare one more. There was just a bar chart as well. This one. What do we like about this one?
Simple.
We can compare the month-wise data very clearly here.
And the monthly totals are more easily visualized. That's compared to the line graphs.
Mm-hmm.
You can see both the trends, and there's easier visualization of the monthly totals for 2019 and 2020.
I would prefer having a line to show the continuity of the data.
Yeah, so for me too, I think for us it does show us the monthly turnovers, but it's difficult to infer from it the trend. So a line would do much better in terms of trend.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see trends though. I mean, you can see how you can make out the trend from the bar, how high the bars are.
Yeah, so that the question that we
yes.
ask is because some of the audiences will not readily go deeper into trying to figure out what the trend looks like, but a line does quite expressly show.
Fair enough. It could emphasize it. I mean, because if it's imposed, it could emphasize it, I suppose.
Yeah, so a line really makes you indeed really easily see a trend. And I mean, you can of course get the top of each bar and draw it imaginatively to see the trend, but having the lines explicitly there already show the trend.
But But then don't you run the risk of over cluttering your visualization? Because there's also that.
Yeah, that you mean that lines clutter your visualization. I mean, the bars
A lot
also
of lines.
clutter the visualization. With lines, I do agree that it can get cluttered. That's why you should try to have 4 or less lines. With 5 or more, it gets difficult to see where the lines go and which line belongs to which category, etc. So with lines, try not to do more than 4.
And if you're trying to compare the ratio between consecutive years, I think a line would make it a bit more difficult, but it depends on what you want to see at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. So I think with most people, they prefer this sort of chart, the line chart. And what you can do is, like I said, maybe highlight a number. So the average turnover was this percent compared to other percent in the other year. Or say we see that the summer is much higher than, so you could pick one data point that is interesting for the HR manager. For instance, can we make sure that a voluntary turnover is less during the summer period because we organize more activities, etc., etc. So there are many different visualizations to choose, and know that there are pluses and minuses for each visualization that you choose. Now let's go into some visualization don'ts. We've mentioned a few of them already, but I want to make them very explicit. So bar charts must start at 0, because you're comparing the heights of the bars. So this is a very funny example of if your bar chart does not start at 0, which is the Filipino man suddenly looks very, very tiny compared to the Dutch guy. But if the bar chart starts at 0, then I mean the Filipino man is still maybe a bit smaller, but then you can actually see the difference in height. Bar charts always start at 0 because you're comparing the height of the bars. If that means you don't see a lot of difference, then that means you don't see a lot of difference, and that actually represents the fact that you don't see that there's not much difference between them. So yeah, just make sure bar charts always start at 0. Next is be careful with cumulative results. So here we have the cumulative annual result. But if you actually don't make a cumulative, but make it a regular line chart instead, then you can see the downward trend of the revenue and you should be worried. While with the cumulative annual revenue, it doesn't actually really show that negative trend. So it seems like the company is doing fine, but it actually isn't. So be careful with cumulative results because they can be difficult to really get your message across.
So which one we should use?
This one, the non-cumulative version. Okay. Next, don't use weird shapes because it makes it hard to compare. Like, should I use the top of Afghanistan as the marker, or is it this part of Wendy's that shows that? No, it's really difficult. So just stick with bars, lines, don't use weird shapes because it gets really hard to compare. We've mentioned this before, secondary axes are usually a no-go because is this bar the revenue or is this the number of sales employees? I don't know. You can distinguish it by these the labels, but it's difficult to interpret. The solution to this is that you can label the data points directly or pull apart the axis vertically. So if I show you, here is where we've labeled them directly. So the number of employees and the revenue, or you pull apart the axis vertically so that you can still compare the heights of the bars versus the trend of the line together. But usually secondary axes are a no-go. Next, beware of manipulation. So this basically tries to manipulate the person viewing this chart is as if gun violence went down compared when the law was instated for stand your ground, but actually the death by guns went up, but because they inverted the chart starting at 0 at the top and going down to go higher, it's actually very misleading and manipulative. So don't try to manipulate your data just to make your own point, but also be critical when you see graphs like this. Next, be careful with too much data and too many data points. This is all pubs in England. There are a lot.
Sorry, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but could you please go back to the previous slide? What's wrong with that representation?
So the thing that is wrong with this representation is that you see that you see the trend, the line go up and up and up and up, and then when this point is here, you see the line go down, which would make you think that this and getting this enforcement of the stand your ground law decreases the number of deaths by gun in Florida. But that is actually not the case, because the y-axis are not going negative, but going positive, but in the wrong direction. So a trend down here actually means an increase in deaths, but because the line goes down, you think that the deaths go down, but they actually go up. But because the y-axis is inverted, it's manipulative in that sense.
Thanks.
You're welcome. So be careful with too much data. These are all pubs in England. They are a lot. So try clustering or a heat map or an isopleth map instead, because here you can really get no information out of it.
One thing need to mention that can we do heat map with GPS data?
Can we? Sorry?
Can we do heat map with GPS data?
So you can use a heat map with this, for instance, saying each region, we count how many pubs are in each region, and then give a color to the number of pubs of a region. And that is how you can apply a heat map here. So a heat map would be a good alternative here. Next and most important is be correct. Here you see that the bars do not match, the number here does not match the height of the bar at all. So make sure your graphs are actually showing the correct data. And then lastly is don't use 3D. This one is the worst because it's a pie chart. It is incorrect and it is 3D. So this is basically the worst you can do. But 3D is really hard to interpret. Please keep your charts 2D. Okay, we've chosen a visualization. Yeah.
So sorry, can you please go back to the slide again and explain it again? Yeah, just now.
Yeah, so basically a general rule is to not use 3D because people it's really difficult to interpret 3D spaces. So if something is more at the back, is it smaller? Yes or no? Could be the same size. If it's 3D, it gets really hard to compare, and it also takes up cognitive load. It is extra information which is not useful information. So 3D is not good to use. Always use a 2D without shading, etc. And this one is also not correct because the larger piece of the pie is a tinier percentage than the smaller piece of the pie. So all in all, it's just not a good visualization. The only thing they did correct here is the fact that it's pie charts with only 2 categories, which is okay if you're wanting to use a pie chart. Next. So we've chosen a visualization, and now we want to make sure it really makes an impact. And we do that by eliminating clutter. Everyone has a cognitive load, and everything takes up cognitive load. So it is all gives some part of your memory. So be smart how we use someone's brain power. So perceptive matters. How hard does your audience need to work to get information? So what do we want to communicate? So that's the signal, and there is noise around it, so it doesn't add value or it distracts from the message, and we want to reduce that noise as much as possible. For instance, on this slide, we have the slide deck that we use for the Analytics for a Better World. This is information, this is information, the date is information, these things on the side are information. So, but sometimes you have to work with a standard slide deck, so it's okay that it's there. Plus, it's been repeated and repeated and repeated, so you start ignoring that information because you know that noise is not important. But do realize that information that is on the screen can sometimes be noise, and we want to reduce that noise as much as possible. So how do we do that? How do we reduce cognitive load? There are 2 things you can do, or actually 3 things. You can have a lower ink to data ratio, and you can eliminate clutter. And these are done with the Gestalt principles, which we'll go through. And you can clarify your message by emphasizing with pre-attentive processing. And we'll focus now on the first 2, which is a lower ink to data ratio and eliminating clutter. So let's look at the lower ink to data ratio. In the chat, please write some suggestions you might have to make this graph more clear without actually changing the graph. So it is a line chart with 3 lines. We're not changing that. We're just changing the setup of this visualization. So I see removing the grid. Oh, there are so many answers, I can't keep up. Too much ink in the background, removing the grid. No shades behind the lines. A title, number of lines. change the ticks of the month. Make the color green different from the border, shorter date annotation, removing the double border. Months are not written correctly. Title is required. Each color should be very distinct. Okay, so there are already a few remove date. Yes, so the month is the only important one. Yes, so let's go through the options I have. So what we can do is indeed remove the background fill. We saw that it is this brown shade. Let's make sure it's the same as the background of the slide itself. Make it white. We have markers, so we have these dots. They do not add much value, so we can remove the dots here. We can remove the shading and remove the grid lines and remove the unnecessary precision. So here we have the shading, which we can remove. We have these grid lines we can remove. And this is 0.000, 2.000. We can make this 0, 2, 4, 6, etc. Someone said we can make the lines very distinct all, but if you want to emphasize one line, we can also just do that. So make 2 lines the same color and emphasize just one and add some direct labels. So instead of having the labels here or down here, we can label them directly. And I will show the graph when we did all of those things. So we've removed the unnecessary labels. We've added January, February, March, the actual month names instead of the dates. We've lightened the axis. We've labeled the lines. We've removed the grid lines. We removed the markers. And we've emphasized one line. So this helps with really emphasizing or removing all that cognitive load that we had, because there was a lot of information coming at us, which was all very unnecessary. Someone said to add a title. Yes, because you should be able to know what you're seeing. But you can also do that either verbally, or now it says lower ink to data ratio, but you can have the title of your slide be the title of your graph, and not have a title to a slide and a title to a graph. So choose one title that really encapsulates the message of what you're trying to show on the graph. So you can see this is a lot nicer to look at and is easier on the eyes, and you really start focusing on this one line, which is apparently important in this case. So this is the lower ink to data ratio that you can use. Next are some of the Gestalt principles that we talked about. Meaning that we want to eliminate clutter. So how do we do this? Well, things that you can do is use the Gestalt principles, and one of them is proximity. So things that are physically close together are thought of to belong together. So we see this grid of dots where we think that this whole grid belongs together. And when we see on the right, we see that these 3 columns belong together because they're physically closer together, and the columns themselves are a little bit further apart from each other. So this is what you can use to focus on certain rows or columns and divide your data up a bit. Next, we have the principle of similarity. So things that are similar color or shape or size of orientation are thought of belonging in a group. You can use this in tables. So no need for having borders around a table if, for instance, the rows are colored, because then you can see that it's a table already. And you can see that one row belongs together because it's the same color. Next up is enclosure. So things that are physically enclosed are thought to belong together. Without this box, you would never think that these 4 dots are belonging together, but because there's a box around it, you suddenly feel that these 4 dots belong together in a way. So you can also do this with shading. For instance, with this forecast shading that you see, okay, these belong together as well, because they are enclosed together with this shading. Next up, we have closure. So we can fit objects in constructs we already know, like a box or a circle, which is why we don't need borders around things necessarily. We know that this chart is already a chart, and we don't need a box around the charts to say that it is just this one picture. We do that automatically already. So a good example is this WWF logo. We don't need to finish these lines of the panda because we already recognize it as being a panda. So we don't need to have those lines enclosing the rest of the picture. Next up is continuity. So we speak as humans the smoothest path, and that is naturally created with continuity. So for instance, with this bar chart, we don't need to have an explicit y-axis line because we already explicitly know that there is a line there. So we see continuity, and that's also why if a bar would be slightly to the right or to the left, we become a bit uncomfortable because it's not the continuous line we are so used to in as humans. Next up, which is a very, very strong principle and the strongest of them all, is connection. So objects that are physically connected are thought to be in a group. So for instance, these are just look like scattered dots, but if you then draw a line between them, then suddenly it becomes a connected line, and they're all connected to each other. And with these, I've applied some other Gestalt principles of a different color, symbols, etc., enclosure, but yet even though these are enclosed, these two are definitely belonging together because they have a line in between them. So connection is a really important principle. I'm thinking, considering time, if we should do this exercise, yes or no. I think I will, and then just make the other bits a little bit shorter. So with this exercise, I would like you to try yourself to apply the lower ink to data ratio that we just talked about. Let me add it into the chat. And there's also some highlights that are mentioned as well. So not just the bar charts, but also some information, which, using the Gestalt principles, I would like you to tie those highlights to the graph. Maybe I'll give you 10 minutes to see how far you get with it. And then we can compare the solutions you came up with.
Can you explain the exercise more?
Yes, I can explain it again. So you see this, I've added a zip file in the chat, and it's also on GitHub. What you'll see there is an Excel file with this bar chart. And what I would like you to do is to make this bar chart have a lower ink to data ratio. So try to remove as much clutter as you can while keeping the information there. Plus, there are some highlights that are mentioned. So in April, there's a reorganization, basically explaining some of the data you see. And I would like you to tie that highlighted information to the graph that you see using the Gestalt principles. So that could be with proximity, with color, with enclosure, etc. So try to make sure to incorporate the highlights in the graph as well.
Essentially bring out the highlights in the chart itself, right?
Yeah, so you can try to incorporate the highlights in the chart, for instance, by adding some different colors, enclosures, etc. Just so that we tie those highlights to the graph.
Nice.
Okay, let's start with until 4:40, and if we need a bit more time, let me know. Once you feel happy, you can post your graphs in the chat. And I'll be here to answer some questions.
I didn't know how to do the second highlights, mentioning the summer months. Can you check?
Yeah, so you're wanting to make the color of the summer months a different color. Is that
I use the gradient to show the increase in the increment of the jobs.
Mm,
I shouldn't do that, I know.
I mean, it is a bit difficult to see what you're trying to do with the gradient.
Okay. I'll make it solid.
Before I forget,
The
I
second
also
point, our summer months are different from your summer months.
I do hear an echo. I don't know if it's because your audio is reverbing, but I don't know if anyone else is.
Okay, now?
Now it should be okay.
Okay.
Great.
I mean that the summer months, which months do you mean? Because
July
yes.
and August.
July and August, okay.
Yeah.
Because they are different from country to another.
Yeah, of course. No, it's the Dutch summer months are July and August. The school holiday months at least. Before I forget, I promised a link to the data visualization book. So I've added the Amazon.com link. So I will ignore the grid from Excel itself.
I've added the highlights inside the chart.
Yeah, we are going to let's just start discussing them now for the sake of time. Let me go to the next slide. So here are some examples that I've made to show a bit the lower ink to text ratio and how to incorporate the highlights. One of them being in the highlights, we say April in orange, and we also show the bar in orange, meaning you can easily relate those two together. Same holds for December and November and December. So that uses the Gestalt principle of things that have the same color of similarity, that they belong together. Here we use the Gestalt principle of proximity, where things that are close together are considered to belong together, meaning we put the highlights of April near the bar of the month of April, the bar of the turnover rates in the summer period near the two bars of the summer, and the holidays near those. We did the same here, but with the colors. So we highlighted the bars, but also gave April, summer, and November, December a bold color. And here we use enclosure, and this only works because the bars are the correct sequence of heights, so to say. So if this bar would be lower and this one would be higher, then you wouldn't be able to do this anymore. But since this data is presented in this way, you can enclose it using this technique. So let's look at a few of your examples. Like this one. So what do we like? Oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to see the chat, but also show you the table. Here we go. So what do we like about this one?
The enclosure.
The enclosement?
Yes.
And it's also easier to read, right? Because the grid lines are gone. It's more precise or less precision compared to the other one. It could be a 0 less even because
direct labels would be fine. Direct labels.
Yeah, direct labels could be nice to add, but if it's not important, then you don't need to do that. So here I see an example of direct labels. So this is indeed very nice because you have direct labels, and then you don't need the y-axis. You don't need direct labels and the y-axis. So this is nice to do. You did miss the highlight for April and November and December, but it's nice to have used the principle of similarity where things with the same color have a different meaning. So here you can see, so let me go back to some of the solutions, that there are many different solutions for this topic, for highlighting certain things that you want to highlight. And just know these principles you can use to your advantage to highlight certain data that you want to highlight. And lowering to text ratio really helps with emphasizing the things that you want to emphasize. Speaking of emphasizing, that brings us to our last section, which is drawing attention where you want it to go. So we want to start clarifying your message by emphasizing one bit of data and using pre-attentive processing, meaning there's already some form of data which draws your attention immediately. And I would like to show you that by doing a little exercise, which is the following. I'm going to show you a slide, and I would like you to count the threes. So how many threes are on this slide?
It is 2, 6, 4, 5, 6.
6.
Yeah, so there are 6 on this slide, but you really have to go through the rows or columns, however you wanted to count them. But if I go to the next slide and say, please count the threes,
6. Easily.
Then it becomes really easy all of a sudden. So this is really the power of pre-attentive attributes. It lets people see what we want them to see before they even know they're seeing it. It's really a powerful method to draw the attention to where you want the attention to be seen without your audience even knowing it. I have a few other tests. Where is your eyes drawn to?
Stop.
This picture.
Stop.
Yeah,
Yes.
immediately to the stop sign. You cannot look anywhere else except for the stop sign. It is red, it is bright, it is bold.
Close.
There is, these are all the cues that you can also use when you are highlighting your data. Make it big, make the color present. It can really draw the attention to your data immediately. Next, I have another picture. Where's your eye drawn to?
The sun on the airplane. Both.
Yeah, so already I see sun, I see plane, you hear both. So most people go to the sun, but the plane is also drawing a lot of attention, which creates
So important
emphasis on
items.
two things. So it creates tension in this. So make sure that in your picture there is not too much tension and two things drawing attention. Next, what is your eye drawn to?
Attraction.
Perennial sale. I think.
Perennial sale, yes.
The pink sign in the middle, right? So the pink sign in the middle asks for the most attention, and what then happens is that people go from where their eyes are, and then they go in the Z downwards. So if there is not a clear visual clue, you start where there's the most attention, and then you go in a Z across the screen, which means in this picture, you miss all the top left corner because you start at the pink and then your eye moves down to the right, which means you
Does the book you recommended on Amazon go into the science of how we react to these things? When you're explaining how human vision works and how we don't go to the left, we do a Z down. And does the book recommend that you recommended go into these things?
Yes, it also goes into these things, emphasizing the correct things and how usually the human.
How we visualize as
Exactly.
animals, how we visualize as humans.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Good.
So take into account that when you use up a big space, if something is emphasized somewhere in the middle, then people tend to read downwards and do not go to the top left anymore. So keep that in mind when creating your slides. Yeah, it does differ a bit from culture, from reading from left to right or from right to left. So keep that in mind as well. Here, someone already mentioned in the previous one that the eyes go nowhere. Here it's also the case that your eyes go basically everywhere and nowhere. So you just everyone picks a random ball. So colorful is awesome for a birthday party, but color is not so awesome when your goal is to have a very clear visualization. It makes it very difficult to focus on one thing. So try to focus to just use one color spectrum and don't use too many colors at the same time. Last one. What is your eye drawn to?
The green berry.
Definitely the green berry, right? So this really uses the power of color strategically. What you can do to test your own visualization yourself is to, because you're working on your visualization, you're making it pretty, you're making it low ink to text, you're trying to highlight things and make things emphasized. Look away from your screen and then look back and see what is the first thing that I see, or ask a friend to look for you what is the first thing you see? And there you can really see if the thing that you want to highlight the most is actually highlighted the most. So take that, use this to your advantage, where the power of color can really help you emphasize the thing that you want to emphasize. There are a few other things that you can use, the pre-attentive attributes. So your eye is always drawn directly to the element that is different from the rest. So if something's orientation is different, or shape, or length, or width, all these, if they are different, then your eye is drawn to the one that is different. This can be also used for text, for instance, bold text, italic text, different color text, etc. Do be careful.
Can you share this page with us?
Yeah, I've shared the entire presentation as a PDF in GitHub, so you can go through this presentation again. Can print it out, put it on your pillow.
Yes.
So you have all the time to read this back. Do be careful with a few of these, or at least know what they entail. So you have, for instance, the one that I've put a lighter border around, the length, width, the intensity, and the size are relative values, meaning that if something is bigger or less intense, you see that it is relatively different from the others. So it's heavier or lighter. It gives a relative value. It doesn't only say something is different, but also how it is different. The same holds for the length line, the length of the line, but also the spatial orientation. So for the dots, the one dot is lower, which also means or can be interpreted as in a lesser value, or same as line length. If a line is longer or shorter, it could be more value or less value. So it gives a quantitative value as well. All the others are more categorical values, so just in a different category: apples and bananas, fruits and vegetables, cities and states, those sorts of things. So when used sparsely, they can, one, draw attention quickly to where you want people to look, and two, they can create some visual hierarchy. People have 3 to 8 seconds in which they decide whether to continue to look at what you show them or direct their attention somewhere else. So if you don't grab someone's attention within those 3 to 8 seconds, they're gone. So make sure that you use someone's attention, or you grab someone's attention well. So the most important attributes for data visualization are things like size. So if something is of equal importance, use equal size. If you want to emphasize importance, then make it bigger. Then we also have colors. Use it strategically. So think about the counts of 3s that we had. So what if I made all numbers a specific color? Then you would lose the 3s in the if they were all a different color, then you wouldn't emphasize the 3s anymore. Use it consistently, so it makes it easier for the audience, because we already know a change of signal can be a change of color can be a change of signal and of meaning. So if we use a color consistently, it gets logical. And gray is a better basis for contrast than black. Black versus green is less of a contrast versus gray and green, for instance. And with color, be careful with color blindness. For instance, red and green color blindness is quite common. So using red for bad and green for good for colorblind people actually doesn't distinguish very well. Most brands have already taken that into account into their brand color scheme. So whatever organization you work for, using that color scheme will probably already take that into consideration. Last but not least, position is important. So people, like I said, read more in a zigzag position, go over the slide from top left to bottom right in a reading fashion. In different cultures, they could go the other way around, but use this to your advantage when making a slide. Those are the 4 steps that I wanted to discuss with you today. Step 5 and step 6 we didn't discuss, but in this book that I've put the Amazon link in the chat, you can read more in depth about these 4 steps, but also the continuous steps of thinking like a designer and returning to the story and using a story arc to really get a very interesting story. So you have a clear message, but how are you going to tell it? Before I let you go, I would like to give you some final tips and tricks. First of all, 1 slide is 1 point. If you try to put too much information on 1 slide, people get lost. So try to make 1 slide 1 point that you want to get across. Next up, free and obvious questions. So here you see, for instance, that the sale has a dip in February. People are going to wonder, why is there a dip in February? You can already add some text there to preempt those questions. Next, add a call to action. If in your story, you've already said what needs to be addressed. So don't be afraid to add that call to action to your slide. It really already puts forward what you want people to do. Don't be afraid to do it. Next, it's not always about the most fantastic detailed analysis. Sometimes a simple point is the strongest point. So you've done a lot of digging, and I know you're very proud of all the data analysis that you've done, but sometimes a small simple point is all you need and is actually the strongest. Sometimes it's nice to build up a graph step by step to show progression. So for instance, here you go from the first quarter of the year to the second, to the third, to the fourth, and you can explain the different sections at a time. So build a graph step by step to show progression is something that you can also use to make sure people don't immediately go to the end when you first still want to tell something about the beginning of the graph. It's exactly 5 o'clock, so the final takeaways that I hope you put in your backpack for this whole cohort and of this training. Know your context. So who are you speaking to? What do you want to address? And how will data help you tell your story? Form follows function. So choose the right visualization. Less is more. Declutter your figures and use the Gestalt principles. Focus attention. So use preemptive processing to your advantage. Have a clear message, so get your 3-minute story straight, your one big idea, and then everything will go smoothly. And pie charts are evil, don't use them. For telling your story combined with data visualization, combine all of these, and I'm sure that you'll do fantastically for the next time you need to present some data and want to tell a story using data visualization. I would like to thank you guys all so much for joining this training. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll be here to answer them as much as possible. If you need additional resources, also let me know. I've added these slides in the GitHub, including the exercises. But if you have any more questions or need a bit more of a voiceover for certain slides, feel free to contact me. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and